Hi, welcome to this short tutorial of me, Tim Clapham from Lux, and in this tutorial hopefully I will help to explain the differences between a pre-multiplied and a straight alpha channel. Now, as you're probably aware, an alpha channel is there to help define which areas of image are transparent and which areas are opaque. Now, I do quite a lot of training out there for FX PhD, Cineversity, also for helloluxx, my blog, and one of the questions that I am constantly asked is what is the difference between a straight and a pre-multiplied alpha channel. So I decided to make this short tutorial to explain the differences. I'll also be taking a look at another option that we have in Cinema 4D, and I'm sure other 3D applications offer this, and this is a way of outputting our multipass but using the straight alpha option, but we'll be going into that later. First of all, let's just have a look at the basic differences between a pre-multiplied and straight alpha channel. I'm going to be working in Adobe After Effects to show the differences, but of course it's important to understand and be able to recognize the differences between pre-multiplied and straight alpha regardless of which application you're using, whether you're compositing with something like After Effects, Shake or Nuke, or whether you're working in 3D in Cinema 4D, Maya, XSI, 3D Studio Max, whatever application you choose to use. It's important to be able to see what is straight alpha, what is a pre-multiplied, how to recognize the difference, and make sure that you interpret your files correctly. Because if you don't interpret your files correctly, what will happen is your composite will not work as well as it could. Very often what will happen is you will end up with a black halo around the edge of your transparent areas. Here we have a Lux logo in 2D with a simple gradient across it, and then I've also created a gradient in the alpha and I've rendered out various versions, and you can see that the gradient in the alpha goes from top to bottom. If we click on the small checker here, nothing happens because this version doesn't have an alpha. The other thing we can do is we can alt click on this small RGB symbol, and if we alt click on here, that will show us the alpha channel, and by doing this we can see that we have a solid opaque alpha channel. So in other words, we have no transparency information in this image. If we open up this version, which uses a pre-multiplied alpha, you can see that the image looks exactly the same. However, if we click to show the checkerboard, you can now see where the alpha information is. So all of this here is totally transparent, and then we have some semi-transparent pixels traveling from the bottom all the way up to the top here. If we open this example, which is a straight alpha, you can see again it looks the same. And if we click on the checkerboard, again it looks exactly the same. And if we alt click to look at the alpha channel, you can see that has the same alpha as our pre-multiplied. So they all look the same, so where is the difference? Now the difference is how the color is stored in the RGB channels. These files have all been interpreted correctly. In other words, this file has been interpreted with pre-multiplied, and you can see this in the top of the project window next to where it says millions of colors plus, and this says pre-multiplied. And if we click on the straight alpha, you can see that this has been interpreted with straight. Now it's important to make sure you interpret your files correctly, and if you know the type of alpha, when you import them into your program, you should make sure that you interpret that correctly. In After Effects, it's a case of selecting the image, and then you can click on this small icon down here. Open this up, and at the very top we have the option for alpha, and we can choose to ignore, we can say it's a straight unmatted, or we can say it's pre-multiplied, and then we can define the color that it's matted against. And 9 times out of 10 this is black. Sometimes it might be white, very rarely it will be any other color, but After Effects gives you the option to define which color it's matted against. So you may be asking, what does unmatted or matted with color mean? Well, what it basically means is whether the red, green and blue channels take the alpha channel into consideration or not. If you consider this a solid red image, what would happen is the red channel will be full. The green and the blue channel will be empty. By full and empty, I mean pure white or pure black. If we then take the alpha channel and we add a gradient from black to white in there, what will happen is we'll have an image that starts at pure red and it ends transparent. However, the red channel is full. That would be considered straight, unmatted. If the red channel actually started at red and faded to black, then that would be considered pre-multiplied, and the colour it's matted with is black. So in other words, we're taking the alpha channel and we're then matting that against the colour channel, and we're matting it with a colour, and most of the time that would be black. So when you use a pre-multiplied alpha channel, what you are essentially doing is you're polluting your colour channels with the colour that you matte against. So let's just say that's black from now on. So in other words, you're taking your colour channel and you're then mixing black into that. You're then taking your alpha channel and subtracting that black back out. Now, as long as you interpret your alpha correctly and the software that you're using knows it's pre-multiplied, then you shouldn't have a problem at all. But if you work with a straight alpha, you're not adding any other alien colour into your RGB channels. But to compensate for that, you need to put something there. So what do you put there? Well, basically you need to continue the colour that's already there. Let's just cancel out of here and let's just take a look at 2 more images. In the project window here, you can see I also have the pre-multiplied alpha TIFF, but this time I've ignored the alpha, and we can see up here alpha ignored. I also have the straight alpha TIFF with the alpha ignored. So let's open the pre-multiplied alpha first of all. And you can see that it looks exactly the same, but if we click on the checkerboard, there's no alpha, so we have no transparency. We Alt-click to show the alpha, and you can see it's solid. So here is a fine example of our colour being mixed into the black. If we open up our straight alpha with the alpha ignored, however, you can see that what happened is that we have the colour channel continue into all the transparent areas. And if you look closely and zoom in, you can see that at the very edges of our colour, as the anti-aliasing occurs between the opaque area and the fully transparent area, we have all these dots of colour. And these are semi-transparent areas, and the reason it's like this is so that when we take our alpha channel and we subtract that from the RGB channels, we'll get a nice pure transition of colour from the opaque area to the transparent area. Now, the problem with straight alpha is immediately apparent. The RGB image doesn't look like the final image. None of the transparent areas show up. We get all these funny dots all over the place. As soon as you show this to a client, the client's going to go, oh my goodness me, what's happened to the image? That isn't like the image that we expected. However, we know that this is because it's using a straight alpha. If we then take the alpha channel and subtract that from the colour channels, we'll end up with the correct result, which looks like this. Now, some people will swear that a straight alpha channel will give you the best results. Some people will swear that a pre-multiplied alpha channel will give you the best results. And to be perfectly honest, as long as the math is done correctly in the background by the application, both of them should give you a perfectly good result. Now, some applications won't accept a straight alpha channel. A lot of editing applications won't accept straight alpha, and you have to use pre-multiplied. Other applications may not calculate pre-multiplied alphas correctly, and you may end up with halos around the edge of your alpha channeled images. So it really depends on the application you're using and the best results you're getting. And that is certainly the best advice I can give you. So really just suck it and see. And if you think you're getting the best result using a straight alpha channel, then use a straight alpha. For instance, in Cinema 4D, if I use texture and I want to use the alpha channel on a material, 99.9% of the time I will use a straight alpha. I tend to get a better result. So if you're creating labels for your objects on materials in Cinema 4D, and you can see a halo around the edge of that alpha image, then try using a straight alpha and you should get a better result. But as I say, as long as the math is done correctly and the RGB channels and the alpha channels are all interpreted correctly, then the result should be fine. If you're unsure of the type of alpha channel that has been saved with an image, then very often one of the best ways to check for it is to interpret it with no alpha and then take a look at the edges. And if you can see areas that have dots such as this, then 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a straight alpha. But probably the best test is just to try both interpretations and see which looks cleaner, because if you interpret it incorrectly you will notice dark edges, especially around semi-transparent areas. If you've got a fully transparent area you won't notice any difference, so you really need to look along the edges between the opaque and the transparent parts of your image. So hopefully that clears up the differences between a straight and a pre-multiplied alpha channel. And just to go over that one more time, it's fairly simple. With a pre-multiplied alpha channel, all of the color channels are matted against another color, which is normally black. However, with a straight alpha, none of the color channels are matted against the alpha, so the color essentially continues. The alpha contains all the transparency, and it's only when you interpret that does the RGB image look correct. So most of the time when you look at the RGB of a straight alpha, it will look incorrect, whereas when you look at the RGB of a pre-multiplied alpha, it will most likely look how you expect. The next thing I'd like to cover is probably specific to users of Cinema 4D only. However, it may be relevant to users of other applications, so you might want to watch or you might not. But basically, within Cinema 4D, when we output multipass renders, we have the option to save our multipass renders with straight alpha as well. It's kind of named slightly incorrectly. What it should really say, in my opinion, is that the multipass renders are unmatted color channels, because they don't actually have an alpha in a lot of those channels, but really the color is unmatted as if it was rendered out like a straight alpha. Before we go into detail on this, let's just jump over to Cinema 4D and take a quick look at the setting that I'm talking about. If you open up your render settings, under the Save tab we have the option for regular image, and you can see under here we have alpha channel. If we check this box, what will happen is Cinema 4D will output the alpha as a pre-multiplied alpha channel by default. But as soon as we check this, you can see underneath straight alpha becomes enabled. But it doesn't become enabled, we're able to actually check or uncheck it. If we then check this box, what will happen is Cinema 4D will render the alpha as a straight alpha. So by now you should know the difference between those two. If we enable multipass and we're going to output a multipass render, let's just switch back to save, but let's just tick to enable the multipass rendering. This gives us another option under here, multipass image. If we fold this down again, we can choose the type of file, the format, the path, etc. But at the bottom here we have the option straight alpha. Now this is separate to the straight alpha that we have in the regular image dialog, and it's a little bit confusing. If we check this, however, what will happen is all of our multipass images will be rendered out with the color unmatted against the alpha. So let's come back to After Effects and take a look at the difference in the results with those two options. Back in After Effects, we have here a couple of folders: straight alpha, pre-multiplied multipass, straight alpha, straight multipass. And the difference between these two renders is that on this one I didn't enable the straight alpha in the multipass option, and on this I did. In each of these folders we have the same passes. We have the diffuse, the reflection and the refraction pass, and if we select each one you can see that only the diffuse actually has an alpha channel. The reflection and the refraction passes don't have alpha channels. But that's not normally a problem, because with the reflection and the refraction pass you would normally use the add composite mode. With something like the shadow pass you would use the multiply mode. So really that doesn't matter. In most situations you would not enable the straight alpha option when rendering multipass. You would just leave that unchecked. If however you wanted to separate your passes and you wanted to use the alpha, say from the diffuse pass, to separate these, and you didn't want to use add, you were using it in some other creative way, or you were using your passes and you wanted to bring them into another comp and then use your alpha channel from your RGB or your diffuse pass and you wanted to use that as a matte to create a track matte, then you might come across problems. Then you might get that black halo around the edge. Of course, one of the options we have within After Effects is to use the remove color matting effect, and this most of the time will help you out and it will get rid of any halos around the edge, and it's designed for exactly that reason. And let me just show you that, and we need to open up a comp and just select a layer. If we come up to Effect, Channel, Remove Color Matting, if you use this effect you can select the color that it's matted against and you can then use this effect to get rid of that black halo around the edges of your alpha channels. But really you shouldn't be using that unless you've interpreted your alpha correctly or you've comped something slightly wrong. A lot of the times that's a quick way out, and I've got no problem with anyone using that. Whatever you can do to get a nice clean composite, that's what I say. So here we have open the composite of our multipass with the straight alpha unchecked. If we just switch off the reflection and the refraction passes first of all and take a look, there's our diffuse pass. If we look at the transparency, you can see that all the alpha is contained within that one layer. We can alt click to show the alpha channel, and there you go. If we, however, enable our reflection pass, which is set to add, and our refraction pass, which is set to add, if we now look at the checkerboard, it's not there. We don't have any transparency in this image anymore. These are set to add, so if we did add a layer behind, it will show up. Now the reason this layer is showing up is because of the composite mode we've used, not because there's transparency there. There isn't transparency there, it's just that these layers, where they're black, they're added on top of the layer underneath. It essentially gets rid of the black through the maths that are used in that composite mode. As I say, 9 times out of 10, this would be the way that you would use multipass. Very rarely will you use the straight option, but you need to think in advance how you're going to composite your image, what you're going to use those passes for, and then you may need to enable that straight option. If we just zoom in and have a look along this edge, you can see that we've got a nice, clean difference between the background and the foreground, and these semi-transparent pixels look perfect. That looks like a good composite. That's working well. Let's come back to our project window and open up the straight alpha, but using the straight alpha option in the multipass as well. Immediately you can see that it looks wrong. You can see that we've got this straight alpha issue where all of our separate passes have got these coloured dots, and also it looks a lot brighter areas like here and here. If we click on here, we still don't have any transparency. And if we alt click, you can see that we still have a solid alpha. And this is because these two layers, the refraction and the reflection, are both still opaque in their alpha channel. The diffuse pass does, however, have an alpha channel, just the same as before. And if we enable the checkerboard, you can see when we enable both of the other channels that again the result just doesn't look right. If we zoom in along the edges, we've got all this unmatted colour that's showing up around the semi-transparent areas, and it just generally looks wrong. So why would we ever want to use that option? In the project window, if I unfold this separate passes folder, in here I have the reflection and the refraction passes, and I've got the pre-multiplied and I've got the straight versions. I've then taken the diffuse pass, which has an alpha channel, and I've used that to create a track matte with the reflection or the refraction pass. So if we open up the reflection pass, let's have a look, and everything looks fine. Here we go, and if we click for our transparency, there's the result. And you can see here that the reflection pass is using the diffuse as an alpha matte. If we zoom in, however, and have a look at the transparent areas, or the semi-transparent areas, as we look along this edge here, you can see that we have a darker area. Now this darker area really shouldn't be there. And this darker area is occurring from the reflection pass where the semi-transparent pixels are matted against black. Now normally you wouldn't do this with your separate passes. You'd use a composite mode for them, so it isn't an issue, as I say. But if you did want to, then you're going to come against this problem. Now you can get around this, as I say, using the remove color matting effect. Let's just add in a solid behind this layer. There we go, and you can see that the black area is pretty obvious, and when we zoom out you can see that we've got a horrible dark line all the way up that edge. So if you wanted to use the remove matting effect, you need to pre-comp this and then use that in your main comp. So if we just create a new comp from this, take our solid that we just made and drag this behind. Of course we're going to see the same problem, but if we select our pre-comp, come to effects, channel, remove color matting, you can see it does a pretty good job. And now along this edge we have a fairly clean result. If we just disable that effect, you can see the result. And even in the areas such as here where it's semi-transparent, you can see the effect working pretty well. So that's one way of getting around it. The other way of getting around it is to use the straight alpha option in multipass when you're rendering out of Cinema 4D. If I open up the straight reflection pass, which is matted again against the diffuse pass using an alpha matte, just as before, but this time we had the straight alpha option enabled on our multipass render. If we click here, you can see we have a transparency grid, nice and clear. If we zoom in, you can see that this edge is indeed nice and clean. And if we take that cyan solid and drag it underneath, you can see that we've got a beautiful clean result. So there's no need for that intermediate step. When you need a pre-comp, you can just set this up with a track matte in your main comp and everything will work fine. There's no need to add the remove color matting effect because we have unmatted color channels, and when we use the alpha for a track matte, we get a nice clean result. Now that doesn't mean that you should always use that straight alpha option when you're rendering multipass, only if you really need to separate your channels out like this. It really depends on the composite that you're aiming for, because if we switch the track matte off, then of course we have this terrible looking result where we have all these horrible edges, and if we add this to our diffuse pass, then we're going to end up with a really bad looking composite. So it really depends on how you're going to be using those passes, but this is why Cinema 4D offers us that extra option. So hopefully that's helped clear up the issue of the straight alpha option within Cinema 4D multipass, and overall you should have a clearer understanding of why we would have a straight and a pre-multiplied alpha option. So hopefully that's of use to some of you guys out there. Thanks very much for watching, and if you want any more tips and tricks, then please don't hesitate, head on over to my blog, which is www.helloluxx.com, and that's Lux with a double X. And there you will find plenty more Cinema 4D and After Effects tips and tricks, and I'm constantly updating it, so don't forget to bookmark it and head back often. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial with me, Tim Clapham. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you all next time.